Xenoblade Chronicles is literally my favorite JRPG of all time. Back in middle school, this game really spoke to me on levels I didn't even know were possible. I found myself relating pretty heavily to the protagonist Shulk. I loved the party you rolled with throughout the game, the plot's twists and turns were enticing and never got old, and most importantly, the game's cast of villains are some of the most eccentric, crazy, yet calculated pieces of garbage you'll ever encounter in a JRPG. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is plain and simply awesome, and when I heard it was getting a remake likely for its 10th anniversary, I knew I had no choice but to finally cover the game that really spoke to me on many levels. So welcome all to my long overdue breakdown of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Today we'll be taking a look at only the base game, with future connected to be examined in, well, a future date, as this marks the first episode of the Xenoblade retrospective as voted by the lot of you over at Twitter. We'll be using the definitive edition for this video, one because it looks absolutely gorgeous, and two because not much has really changed from the Wii and new 3DS ports, minus some incredible quality of life improvements. So you guys got all that? Alright, let's begin with a quick overview of the story. Now, I know this game is going to be 10 years old, so pardon me when I say that I will not be spoiling the game rotten like a lot of people would think I would. I understand that this is a definitive edition look, so there's going to be a lot of new players coming into the game, so I will just be giving you a general overview around the first 30 minutes to an hour of playtime. On top of that, I also, when we get to the spoiler sections, only want to talk about some of the standout moments that really struck home with me, rather than giving you an entire breakdown analysis of the story. Alright, now that that's all out the way, let's get straight into our general overview. The game opens with two titans going at it in a battle, the Mechonis and Bionis, both of which having their own species being the Mechon and the Homs. They are locked in warfare as they fight to protect each other's respective lands. Enter our homie Dunban, the Monado Wilder and his crew of misfits Dixon and Mumkar. They're one of the holding lines of defense during the giant battle for Sword Valley. Things aren't looking too good, however, as the Monado is taking quite a toll on Dunban, rendering his left arm useless, and Mumkar is being an absolute coward, running away from the fighting and leaving it up to Dixon and Dunban to fend for themselves. These two fight as long as they can, holding off many Mechonist troops, but eventually, sadly, they have no choice but to fall back. Flash forward some time to our protagonist Shulk. Taking in the sights of Colony 9, he's greeted by his long-term friend Ryan. They make their way back through Colony 9, talk to some townsfolk, maybe do some side quests depending on how things go and how long you take, but don't take too long, right? It's part of the militia and has to get his way back in time before his commander has a yell at him. As Ryan and Shulk go on their separate ways, Shulk spends time examining the Monado, and after a conversation detailing the events of Dunban and his Monado usage, Ryan comes in and starts messing with things. It causes a strange reaction, blowing Ryan backwards, but interestingly enough, Shulk is able to handle the Monado with care and put it back in its place. Ryan informs Shulk after a little bit of a spat that Colony 9 needs a new anti-air battery for one of their mortars, and Ryan has to go set it up. We get a perspective shift where we play as another one of Shulk's friends, Fiora, who delivers a tasty meal over to Shulk, and they share a heartwarming story segment. After a bit of talking, they meet up with Ryan and work through the Tafora cave to grab the power source. However, upon returning to Colony 9, it is set ablaze, as it's under attack by a swarm of Mechon. The group quickly rushes to help out the village and townspeople, and things just don't go well considering the fact that the Homs only have normal non-anti-Mechon weapons, and the Monado was the only known weapon to do any damage to these guys. And unfortunately, our legendary hero Dunban, the likes of which is severely injured in battle, can't really help. That doesn't stop his efforts, however. Dunban does swoop in, grabs the Monado, and puts in all the work he possibly can despite his fractured state, and it's just not good enough. And Dunban is walked far away by a Mechonist blast. The party is a little bit scattered, but thankfully Shulk builds up the courage, grabs the Monado, and charges at the Mechon head first. As he's doing so, he starts seeing visions play throughout his mind, letting him get the advantage over the enemies ahead as he can predict their movements move by move. He easily destroys them and is shocked when the final boss of sorts enters his arena, the metal-faced Mechon himself, Metal Face. The team, Ryan, Shulk, and Dunban take it on but barely make a dent. Then Fiora comes out of nowhere with a freshly charged energy source, loads it up into the anti-air machine, and thrusts headfirst into Metal Face with all her might.
Why the Monado has no effect? Shulk! Ryan, get down! Stay back! I'll take it from here. No! You can't take anymore! I just... Fiora! Get back!
I won't let you hurt any more people. We will save Colony 9!
Fiora! Get out of here! Run!
You want more?
Fiora! I'll kill you!
It's not enough. Colony 9 is destroyed, and Shulk along with Dunban and Ryan lost their good friend and sister respectively. Now Shulk, driven by vengeance, vows to end the Mechon, save Colony 9, and most importantly, unlock the secrets behind this Monado blade. Now that's just a gross oversimplification of all the intriguing, beautifully crafted, small moment-to-moment story segments that happen throughout just the first hour of the game. It does a extremely exquisite job of establishing these three major characters, Fiora, Ryan, and Shulk, and really showing off how much of good friends they were during their entire livelihoods when they were staying at Colony 9. It's an extremely good setup, and I just really fell in love with the characters instantly, and every time I replay this opening section, it happens all over again. I've played through Xenoblade Chronicles 3 times in my livelihood, and every single time I've replayed it, it just gets better and better, and even replaying it again for the Switch version, aka my 3rd time, it just feels at home. I never ever once felt like this was out of place or segments just didn't feel well. It's one of the best intros in a JRPG, and it's very quick and to the point, and it doesn't last or overstay its welcome while doing an effective job of establishing its characters, world, and most importantly, its major themes. Xenoblade Chronicles storyline does start off rather simplistic from everything you've heard. I'm sure you probably think of that. It's a tale built off of your typical JRPG trademarks. You have destruction, confusion, and revenge, but as the plot thickens and new and returning characters are introduced throughout, and motivations from the party members change, creating a really interesting ebb and flow with a compelling, constantly shifting narrative that will have you on the edge of your seat with all its incredible twists and turns, which the likes of which we will most definitely talk about during the spoiler section. Thankfully, for once, the story is only half of how awesome Xenoblade Chronicle is. Yeah, it's only a humongous half, a huge chunk if you will, but it's still half nonetheless. Presentation and gameplay all work in tandem to create an experience well worth the 80+ hours you'll put into the game. I mean, we gotta say it, this game is flat out gorgeous, honestly, on any platform you play on. Sure, the Wii and 3DS versions, textures and resolution haven't aged the best, but for a game that's in the 2010 standards, I think it still looks awesome, and it holds up quite nicely in the larger open environments for the original Wii version. Thankfully, the Switch version goes above and beyond expectations. Using what seems to be the Xenoblade 2 engine, it fully realizes the true vision and scope of the original Xenoblade, while reinventing the art style and doing a couple of small touches to fully make it feel like the anime epic it was meant to be. The enhanced texture work and foliage increase does a lot to make places in the Guar Plain especially really come alive, and sadly it's missing some of the Wii physics like swaying trees in the wind during stormy weather or blades of grass moving on and feeling a lot less static, but the trade-off we get with more detailed textures, lighting, and other benefits I think are pretty worthy for a Switch port, remaster if you will. Xenoblade's world and music just go crazy. Each location has a night and day theme, the battle music never fails to get you pumped no matter how small or big the fights are, and the open world posing a real threat to you with level 80 enemies that can play hyper aggressively and wipe your party out in mere seconds if you don't tread carefully in certain areas, always feels like you're on the edge of your seat. Like anything can kill you at any minute, and you gotta be safe and take the right routes to make sure that doesn't happen to you. You can also lure out more powerful baddies away from certain locations so you can sneak into spots without having to deal with too much trouble, especially comes in handy when you're under fire or just need to grab a quick item for a side quest or something of the sort. My only gripe I have with the world design is, well, traveling on foot does often feel a bit too slow, especially with all the back and forth questing you have to do. It gets really bad when you have to climb at any location, and the Mekon Valley and later sections of the game really accentuate this issue. It quickly becomes a slog to say the least. Sure, there's tons of skip points allowing for fast travel, and the load times are actually pretty instantaneous, but the fact that there's so many of them in certain areas and so few in others make the experience feel, I guess, just a bit uneven, and it still leads to a ton of back and forth. Thankfully, it's nice that the side quests and objective markers are pretty clear cut to find out, with the breadcrumb trail leading you right to your collectibles directly, or monsters or whatever you need to fight, and sometimes on rare occasion just giving you a general overview of the area so you actually do have to explore a bit for the fetch quest. It never becomes too much of a grind. The world and presentation for both side and main quest just makes the game pretty easygoing. The crux of the difficulty minus some confusing world design is, well, the combat. Xenoblade's combat is akin to what I would consider an MMORPG. You select a target, start an auto battle system, and use a myriad of different arts and abilities to tackle on your opponents. Shulk starts as a typical warrior class if you will. Average DPS, average speed, average abilities, you get the gist. Many arts are direction specific, like using backslash behind an opponent to inflict a 2 to 1.5 times multiplier for damage on monsters, or air slash to the side to inflict break and slow. Combining these moves is very important, as using things like break and slow allow for setups where you can either topple or stun the opposition, or even use both in tangent for humongous damage combos. You can further output tons of damage using the chain attack system. Comboing with your party sets up for big damage using the right combinations of breaks, stuns, topples, and other status effects that will sometimes open the door for a QTE, which timed right allows for a chance at extra damage or a quick heal. There are a lot of tactics that come with the art system, and the game takes full advantage of this with Shulk's foresight, a mechanic that lets Shulk see into the future before an enemy strikes. This lets you make some split-second decisions that could be the difference between an alive or dead party member. This is also why it's important to save your Monado arts for the bigger moments, like when taking on mobs or boss encounters. You can cast shield, speed, and a variety of other moves to nullify damage on attacks, and thankfully, in an unfortunate occasion, you used up all of your arts. In other events, you can use a bar of your talent gauge to warn your party members for an incoming attack ahead. You can also use a talent gauge for revives, and of course, using all three of them allows for a chain attack. This lends itself naturally to some really satisfying moment-to-moment micromanagement gameplay that sets up for non-stop hype combat moments. This is the main reason I was addicted to the battle system throughout my multitude of playthroughs over the years. Each battle really feels unique, and the game actively rewards you for trying out new party combinations and grinding battles with the likes of gem crafting, affinity charts, and learning what works for you to make some overpowered builds. Through the course of the game, you'll find tons of materials and crystals that can be used to form new gem parts. These gems go into various armor and weapon pieces, allowing for character buffs. This goes a extremely long way to helping tweak your character to whatever build you see fit, which is really cool. There's also what feels like an endless amount of gem combos to find, so crafting and creating gems never gets old. Speaking of which, we gotta talk talk about side quests and the aforementioned affinity system. The game is all about building relationships with people you meet along your journey. Sure, some NPCs you encounter, mainly the merchant side quest givers, are pretty vapid in their quests they give out. They don't do too much to further the plot or even have their own self-contained plot. It's usually just go here, kill this, or go here, find that. However, there are way too many great side quests that go out of their way to give most NPCs a mini arc to complete that's always almost interesting to see through the end. Some highlights for me are looking throughout the Guar Plains and Bionis in general in search for a grandma's dead son's armor pieces so she can have a piece of him back to remember as. Colony 9's friendship quest where you prove to two young girls that the friendship is key and fighting with each other over petty beliefs is never good by increasing your affinity with members in your own party. And of course, we can't forget basically the entire Colony 6 rebuilding side quest, which has you going all around Bionis looking for materials, then helping citizens rebuild their fallen colony. It's all really heartwarming stuff, and despite the admittedly way too long grind for hitting the simplest goals, especially when it comes to leveling up your teammates' affinity, I can't help but fall in love with the amount of effort the developers put in to make this world as immersive as possible. One gripe I do have with the affinity system is, well, plain and simple, it takes way too long to level everyone up, no matter how often you group for battles in the sort, and on top of that, sadly, there's barely any tools minus giving gifts to help evenly distribute it, maxing out your entire party's affinity without a hefty grind, especially when towards the end of the game there's some new characters that join your party which put a damper on progressing the main story because you spend the bulk of your adventure figuring out what you can do to max out their tree. Some might ask, well, why bother? It's just a fun little system to see a heart meter go up, right? But sadly, if you've played the game, you know that's not the case. It's so much more. The affinity system, at least within your party, directly influences what side passive boosts you'll get during fights through the skill tree. They are used as passive buffs to keep your party in tip-top shape. They range from simple HP increase during healing buffs to more wacky ones like increased attack damage during the day and things of that nature. There's 3 different branches to choose from, and you want to make sure you level them all up because the way the skill tree is managed, you have specific shapes that need to be put in certain affinity slots, the likes of which can't be maxed out or accessed by certain party members unless their affinity level with each other is high. I know that's really confusing, and there's no way to dumb it down. It's really just that confusing, sadly. A long story short, side quests, monster grinding, and of course the main story missions are all extremely important, and constantly rotating your team and leveling everyone up is of utmost importance. Now I know what you're thinking. This system sounds absolutely insane. Why would anyone want to do this? And I understand, the system isn't for everyone, and if that sounds like way too much or way too confusing for you, I understand 100%, which is why thankfully the Switch version has some things to help out with this struggle. The casual mode is really great at giving extra XP, affinity, and other benefits to make the game a lot more easygoing for new players, and I can't lie, I often found myself turning this mode on for side quest grinding so I could just breeze through the game at a more lenient pace. You still have to gemcraft, grind for money, and of course do side quests for affinity reasons, but hey, at least the process to all those tasks are just a bit more easier to complete. I think that's a win in my book. Basically, the gameplay loop Xenoblade Chronicles offers is easily one of the most unique I've seen in a JRPG. Basically, the gameplay loop in Xenoblade Chronicles is absolutely endearing. It's one of the most unique JRPGs I've ever played, and the game constantly rewards the player with all sorts of character building moments like heart-to-hearts, which further flesh out character motivations, or just more often than not, gives us some pretty funny, heartwarming moments. It's filled to the brim with charm, and honestly, I love the concept of having all of my actions in the game, even the most minute tasks like monster grinding, pay off in really big and sometimes small ways. That affects your characters directly through passive buffs with gameplay, or something major like a story segment via heart-to-hearts. It's a really unique system, and I have yet to see a JRPG tackle this type of system head-on. You have the Persona games, which are pretty close with their confidence system, but it's mainly more visual novel-esque than direct gameplay affecting, how you're using your day-to-day actions. Again, if you are a Persona fan, a lot of the stuff might sound a little bit familiar to you with the affinity chart and things, and if you do like that confident building system, you're gonna feel right at home with the likes of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Oh, and do I even have to say anything about how good the music is? It is incredible. I mean, downright gorgeous stuff. You have the hard-hitting rock tracks like They Will Know Our Names, Mechanical Rhythm, many other bangers that you guys all know, the more sweeping orchestral pieces that definitely hit during the major boss fights, like a certain one with a certain god, and all sorts of other tracks that come to mind. I mean, confrontation with an enemy, anyone? Like, really? Xenoblade music just slaps, okay? Xenoblade music is absolutely top tier. It cannot be topped. It is incredible. The amount of character the music has, from its more melodic tracks like the piano riffs that play throughout Guar Plains during nighttime, or some of the jungler themes during night, are really, really good stuff. And some of my standouts are just some of the overworld themes like the Aerith Sea. It's just really relaxing, peaceful songs to listen to, and it's always nice that it kind of always intertwines with the battle themes when you're going into your grind fest. All in all, if you couldn't already tell, Xenoblade Chronicles by all means is a full-on masterpiece. Easily one of the best games of the 2010s, if not actually, no, one of my top 5 of the 2010s, best of the decade, and it's fleshing out of its world, characters, and much more through affinity charts, side quests, and of course the main story and heart to hearts that consist throughout the game is something that has to be applauded for a title that originally released in 2010 on the Wii. This game was very clearly a love letter to JRPGs, and you could tell Monolith Soft wanted to do everything in their power to make something that resonates with audiences, especially after their heartbreaking failure, well, commercially, that was the Xenosaga franchise. It really does says a lot that they pulled themselves by the bootstraps and made something so incredible on a platform that was honestly so underwhelming to many of the mass audience. The world design is downright breathtaking. The character and plots are equal parts wholesome and heartbreaking. The music is a blessing to the ears, and just well to be 100, it's perfect. I mean, sure, it has its flaws. Of course it has its flaws, but it's as close to perfect as an RPG can possibly be. If you've never played Xenoblade Chronicles and anything that I described sounds remotely interesting, whether it be the world design I've been showing off through various clips or pieces of media that just really hit different from everything I've been showing off, maybe it was the music I highlighted, I don't know what it is, but if any of this game sounds remotely cool to you, I implore you to pick up a copy for the Switch and give this game a shot. It is one of the best JRPGs ever made, and despite me hearing that sentiment a lot from many, it's very sad that I don't know many people that have finished it. This game is an absolute classic, and I implore you to check this one out. So, with all my no spoilerly thoughts out the way, we gotta talk about the, well, spoiler side of the story, so let this be your warning that I'm about to go completely off the walls, off the rails, and go 100% into every nook and cranny that I loved about Xenoblade Chronicles story. Completely spoiler rotten, alright? Now, again, if you are getting ready for the spoiler section and eating your popcorn for a full-blown 40 trillion hour analysis, that's not what this is going to be about. I just want to highlight some of my personal favorite moments to give a little bit of insight to what makes the characters tick and things like that, and why I can relate to them, or why I think this is just a really good storyline, you feel me? So I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from with that, and without further ado, let's get right into those spoilers. So off the bat, this cast is easily the best JRPG cast ever. Seeing characters like the usual tough guy stereotype Ryan that wants to protect his friends Shulk and Fiora, and he did that a lot as kids, grow up and realize he's now the weaker one in the entire group and wants to support his friends with emotions and his own thoughts and feelings rather than use his brute strength all of the time, is a really good take on the usual tough guy dynamic, and it's done and executed very well in Xenoblade Chronicles. The dynamic he shares with Sharla really accentuates this, and I just enjoy their heart-to-hearts massively. Speaking of which, Sharla is a really awesome character. She's tragic and quite a depressive character when you start digging into her lore and backstory, but at the end of the day, she really has a heart of gold and means a lot to the core party. Charlotte's entire storyline really coincides with Ryan because they're both massively losing pieces of their friends or family, if you will, where Ryan's really losing, his family in a way because Shulk and him growing up so quickly, so fast, and seeing that he doesn't need Ryan's protection and all that is really heartbreaking to him because that was kind of his thing as they were kids, and now he just completely is past the need for that. And seeing Charlotte see that she doesn't really need to protect Juju anymore because he's learning that he doesn't have to be this headstrong guy and going out there and almost getting himself killed in all these stupid crazy encounters, like when a metal-faced Mechon kidnaps him or when he's being assaulted in Colony 6 and all that crazy stuff. He kind of just decides that, you know what, I'm gonna take myself out of the situation entirely because I'm not strong enough yet, and instead I'm gonna use my willingness to help people and stay at Colony 6 and help them rebuild. And I thought that was a really great interaction, and seeing Juju, Charla, and Ryan and Shulk and all those characters kind of come together in that way is really awesome. The introductions of Melia, Ricky, and Elvis are also really well placed and also a ton of fun on their introductions. Melia being an aristocratic princess with a heart of gold, one full of second guesses and emotional guidance rather than letting her royalty speak for herself. Ricky, a hero who, well, to be blunt, is just a full-on tiny little father figure. He cares for his loving wife and let me check the wiki just to make sure. 11 kids, and wants to help Shulk and his crew save the village and defeat the Mechon threat. Elvis is a mysterious figure, one that belongs to the High Entia, a race of long-living people that basically stay in their own lane and never really interfere with the likes of the other race, the Homs. Elvis is a pretty important figure in the story, teaching Shulk the secrets of the Monado, like the Purge Art, which is used to help defeat the Telethia race, a race of corrupt Entia people. Melia, like the rest of her brethren, is a special case as she is not only half Homs, but also half Entia, which is why her character is a lot more caring and understanding of Shulk and his people. Melia is a great addition to the party, and not only is she a fun mage to control during combat, but seeing the world through her eyes and following her as she slowly unravels the outside world is really fun to watch. Also, her mini crush on Shulk is a tiny cute little thing that they threw in the game. It doesn't really go anywhere, especially when Fiora gets introduced, but it is a nice little gesture they threw in, and their heart-to-hearts are pretty cute and relatable. Now, Elvis is a character I kind of skimmed over because we're going to cover him a lot towards the latter half of the game. Since we're in spoilers, he's basically a humongous plot detail thing for the epilogue. He's a really important character, but he doesn't play too big of a role. He kind of just sits on the sidelines, gasses up Shulk, and basically tells him he can be his own god essentially and do whatever he wants because he's that OP and he doesn't need to let Zanza control him. Quick spoilers out the way, he's a humongous player in the 3D game of chess that Zanza, Elvis, and Dixon play, and all of this stuff mainly gets revealed at, again, the literal last couple hours in the epilogue essentially of the game. So we'll cover this character in a little bit. Aside from that, however, he does do a good job of basically helping everyone out. He's a foresight seer as well, similar to Shulk, so his entire purpose in being the Entia is basically telling people and moving the puzzles in place for Zanza to make his return essentially, but it doesn't really mean much because it's all another giant game of 3D chess because all of their visions run out when they realize Shulk is basically his own god, person, whatever you want to call it. Kind of says no to fate and does what he wants to do, right? And that's one of the coolest things about Elvis and Zanza and their entire arc. And speaking of Zanza, we gotta talk about their tiny, very minor introduction, or what seems like is going to be a minor introduction on Prison Island. Everyone was kind of spooked out by the Zanza guy, but he is revealed to be this dude who seems to give Shulk a bunch of mysterious powers. I mean, the metal-faced Mechon could not be scratched by the Monado. It was one of the big plot points. That is why Shulk wanted to get super powerful, figure out the secrets of the Monado so he could take down Metal-Face. And there's also a white-faced Mechon that's introduced, which we all kind of know was Fiora because they showed a bunch of shots of it in the opening intros and it's kind of obvious. But regardless, Fiora comes back as this white-faced Mechon who is being controlled by the Mechanus god, so that's a pretty important plot note we'll get to in a little bit. Regardless, Zanza gives Shulk all of his abilities that he needs, quote-unquote, and he takes down Metal-Face with ease after Metal-Face commits his another kill where he kills Milia's father. That's right, absolutely murks this guy. Shulk goes full vengeance mode, takes on Metal-Face, damages him quite a bit, and then the white-faced Mechon kind of swoops in, saves the day, and they start deciding, hey, we need to take the fight straight to them in the Mechon Valley, Mechon base, and we're gonna pull up, give them the hands, and hopefully take a stand and stop the Mechon threat, right? And that's where the giant crux of the plot comes from. But the thing that makes this Prison Island arc fight, whatever you call it, so important is Shulk realizing that the Mechon are basically using Homs. They're learning the fact that Mumkar, one of the evil people that ditched Dixon and Dunban way back in the prologue of the game. He's Metal Face. The white-faced Mechon is Fiora. So now Shulk's having these second thoughts, like maybe I shouldn't go after all the Mechon. Maybe there's something deeper to it. Maybe these guys don't deserve the hands I'm about to give them. You know what I mean? It's a really interesting deconstruction of that vengeance arc, because now Shulk's constantly having second thoughts as they're going through the Mechonis Valley and things of that nature, and even talking with his friends and in his party, he's starting to learn that maybe he doesn't want to destroy all the Mechon. He just wants to do what he can to save Fiora and get back to a normal life as quickly as possible, because he just wants to save the person he basically loves the most. I mean, let's just keep it real. It's a very well executed storyline, and seeing Shulk constantly waver between full-on vengeance mode and wanting to just save Fiora and figuring out the secrets of not just the Monado now but the world around him, and doing everything in his power to just unravel everything and figure it out, is a really sad yet uplifting look at just this kind of existential dread Shulk is going through. He just doesn't know what everything is anymore. All of his preconceived thoughts on the Mechon and the Mechonis locations and the Mechonis people, especially when they start introducing the Mechon people themselves, it just goes out the window, and he's very lost and confused. And even when they're telling him to kill the full-on Mechon leader because he went completely off the rails when this god Zanza started attacking, it really does do a lot to Shulk's psyche. And I really enjoy how it deconstructs that, pieces it apart, and through heart-to-hearts and a variety of other things, you start unraveling his character and learning about that. It is by far one of the best interesting looks at a JRPG protagonist and the typical vengeance plot, and taking it and flipping it on its head and really breaking down what drives a character to do what they do, and then taking the drive basically from him and ripping it out of his system and showing him slowly but surely, like, is this the right thing to do? What makes it good? Should we go through with this and all that? And having his friends constantly second guess and help him out, like, hey, it's fine, but he's still sitting there like, nah, there's something more to this. It's really awesome, and Xenoblade does a very good job of making it work, IMO. Now, this wouldn't mean anything if it wasn't for the fact that the writing of this game is absolutely fantastic, and on top of that, the voice work is actually really good. I think the British accents on all the characters and stuff like that just work out really well, and it's great. It's really good voice acting. It's a very strong localization script, and I think the game overall just benefits a lot from all of its personal tiny little quirks and charms. I mean, even Ricky's kind of annoying speech patterns work out really well, and it makes the character just that much better. Now, the big twist slash reveal in this game that always floors me ever since I was a kid was basically Shulk and Zanza's just giant fight reveal. Now, this is what makes this part so important. In most JRPGs you play at this time, it's you defeating a god type figure, right? Whether it be Kefka, whether it be, you know, something from Final Fantasy, whether, you know, you guys get the gist from the JRPGs, right? There's always like one normal character that turns into a god, or a giant evil baddie who is a god that you got to go and defeat and change fate, right? Your normal standard JRPG affair. But I've never in my entire life played a JRPG ever where the god was living inside of the character. And when I learned about that and how Shulk basically was just rendered useless, everything he was doing meant literally nothing because Zanza was just living in him this whole time, and he was just a waste of space, essentially just a vessel for Zanza to get to where he needs to be. That was like the most mind-blowing plot twist ever. All the power that Shulk had was never his, it was all Zanza's, right? Everything that he was doing up to that point, was it really his free thought and will, or was it just Zanza taking over? Now, the game quickly dashes away with this by Elvis basically coming out and saying, you're your own person, Shulk, could get to it, wake up from the coma and start throwing those hands, buddy. And that's basically what he does. But it's a really interesting look at kind of taking that JRPG protagonist, a typical storyline, and again flipping it on its head, which is basically all Xenoblade Chronicles is about. It's really a great deconstruction, I guess you could call it just a subversion of your typical JRPG tropes, and I think they do a really good job on that. Of course, Shulk ends up going to the lengths and actually fighting this godly figure and making, kind of essentially making himself his own god, especially when you start learning about the backstory and how this Xenoblade world was even created, which was basically some scientists were in a lab, they they messed up massively and made their own universe for some reason, and that's what led to the events of Xenoblade Chronicles, because Zanza didn't really like the universe he made and just wanted to recreate it again, which I find such a savage thing to do. Just what an absolute savage, dude. And of course Shulk comes through and stops it and says, no, you're not taking the lives you created us, and we're gonna do our own thing, and we're gonna make our own world, and da-da-da-da. It's great. It's a really cool look and subversion of expectations. I think the developers did a super good job, or I should say script writers or whatever you want to call it, did a super good job of making the storyline just fit so well. I could go on for years about what makes Xenoblade Chronicles storyline so good, but this is a retrospective, so I'm gonna try to keep it short, and I got out all the points I really want to discuss too. That being said, despite all of my praising, there are just a lot of things in this game that, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but there are a couple things in this game that just don't necessarily work out. Some characters are just flat out forgettable, mainly all of the henchmen type villains. Dixon being a huge arbiter, if you will, for Zanza's return was kind of cliche, I guess, a little on the nose. It didn't also make much sense that not only was Dixon working with Zanza, but also Elvis, and also the one girl that I don't even remember the name of because she plays such a tiny role. Basically, it's just a arbiter to make sure every single high Entia person turns into Telethia so they could go destroy the Homs. It all felt very, I guess, pointless, and just wanted to create a huge giant epic battle scene, which was cool, and also give Millie another character death because, you know, she's not been through enough after losing her dad. She got to lose her brother too. But it also just felt a little, I don't know, a lot. It felt like just a build up so they could get an epic battle scene, which didn't really pay off in the end anyways, because Shulk's just gonna run in there and mop everyone because he's a literal god. But besides that, I think the storyline did a really good job. It is one of the craziest storylines I've ever played in JRPG, with plenty of expectations to be subverted, and every character in the game is just great. And even despite what I said about Dixon, his absolute crazy 180 turn into being this crazy maniac arbiter guy that is a cult leader essentially for Zanza was awesome, and I definitely enjoyed every bit and part I played of the game. So, with that all being said, if you couldn't already tell, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is a game you should pick up now, today. It is easily one of the best JRPGs on the market. If you haven't played it and you got this far and any of the spoiler stuff I talked about sounds remotely interesting to you, get out there and play it. I know I didn't cover a lot of stuff. There's so much I didn't talk about. How Charlotte and Ryan kind of start falling in love with each other. Ricky and his personal relationships with Millie and Ryan and Charlotte, and all his cool little heart-to-hearts where he's just talking about what it's like being a dad and funny stuff like that. All your, Dunban and his relationship where he's reconnecting with Fiora when she comes back into your party. Shulk and Fiora's little dating relationship. You guys get the gist. There's a lot to cover, but this is a 116-hour game. This is only like, what, a 30-40 minute video. There's way too much to get into. So we will do a giant story analysis and breakdown when I want to further deepen the plot, but I'm gonna save that for the end of the retrospective, okay? As of now, we're just gonna give you a general coverage / in-depth look at what makes these games such a replayable avenue. And today we finally got to take a look at my personal favorite JRPG of all time, and I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from, that I want to save my story analysis for a bit later, as all of the stories in my opinion link together pretty interestingly, so I do want to take a look at that. Thank you all so much for watching the Xenoblade Chronicles review, okay? This was an absolute massive undertaking for me. If you couldn't tell why it took so long for this video to come out and why some parts of footage don't match up, as I said in my editor's note, it's because I lost over 30 plus hours of footage, unfortunately, because of some stupid hard drive shenanigans. And but I had to make the video, okay? I had to talk about this game because it's just one of my favorites, so if stuff doesn't really match up with the spoiler section, hope you understand that this is why. I am going to use a couple people's footage, I guess like those cutscene highlight channels on YouTube, just so I can kind of get the point across of what I'm talking about, but gameplay-wise, it might be a little like hit and miss. I'm very sorry about that. Regardless, thank you all again so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below. And I will see you guys on the next Xenoblade Chronicles review. We'll be looking at Xenoblade Chronicles X, and I'm very much looking forward to it. But before we get to Xenoblade Chronicles X, we have one review coming up next that is going to be an absolutely massive undertaking, as I'm going to be taking a look at two games in one franchise that have the internet split down the middle, and that is The Last of Us 1 and The Last of Us 2. So prepare for one of the most oppressive rides you'll ever be on. and let's see if we can shed a little bit of light on a game that is just so dark and depressing. Alright, I'll see you guys very soon. Have a good one. Peace.